Lesson 8 is on John chapters 11 and 12. Ever since at least chapter 6, we have been studying the last year before the death of Jesus. We go from one Passover in chapter 6 to another Passover, which was the last Passover, which we come to in this lesson. These two chapters mark the close of the public ministry of Jesus. And in fact, the rest of the book will deal with the last week of Jesus' life and then the resurrection in the last couple of chapters. Chapter 11 deals with a miracle that only occurs in John. That is the raising of Lazarus from the dead. Although this miracle does not appear in any of the other Gospels, it was an occurrence of great significance in the life of Jesus, according to the Gospel, according to John. It is the raising of Lazarus that brings the opposition of Jesus to a head. There is strong testimony to the reality of what happens here. It is almost compelling, and many people believe because of the miracle that occurred at the tomb of Lazarus. That puts the pressure on Jewish leaders. They decide that something has to be done, and so in council together, they decide to put him to death, according to chapter 11 and verse 53. In verse 54, we are told that Jesus walked no more openly among the Jews after that point. Verse 55 indicates that the Passover was near at hand. It would be that Passover at which Jesus would be crucified. So we study this crucial miracle and its aftermath, bringing the public ministry of Jesus to a close in these two chapters. Now first, the miracle, chapter 11. Now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, of the village of Mary and her sister Martha. And it was that Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Now notice that we only have this account recorded in the next chapter. John goes on to report this incident. And yet it was evidently something that the readers of the Gospel of John would know about before they get this Gospel, perhaps knowing it from the other Gospels or somehow. And when he mentions this Mary, then he is able to explain who she is by referring to that incident. They already know about that incident, apparently. Verse 3, the sisters therefore sent unto him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. These were special friends of Jesus. But when Jesus heard it, he said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified thereby. I think he means that death is not to be its final result. Lazarus does die, of course, but there are several passages in the Gospel according to John in which physical death is shown to be something that does not touch this spiritual life and is really an insignificant thing. This sickness is for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified thereby. Now think all the way back to chapter 1, when we're told the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld His glory. Glory as of the only begotten of the Father. That's in chapter 1, verse 14. And then in chapter 2, at Cana of Galilee, He changed the water to wine, and we're told this beginning of signs did Jesus in Cana of Galilee, and manifested His glory. It was through these signs that His glory was manifested. And so in this case, it was that the Son of Man, or Son of God, may be glorified thereby. This is the first point that gives the significance of this miracle. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. When therefore he heard that he was sick, he abode at that time 2 days in the place where he was. So I think putting those two statements together, we see that it was not because he didn't care anything about him that he does not go up there. He just lags along behind for 2 days. He wanted to have the opportunity to perform this grand miracle and to show forth his glory and give people an opportunity to come to faith. It was not because of any lack of love that he just lags behind and lets Lazarus die. Verse 7, then after this, he saith to the disciples, let us go into Judea again. The disciples said unto him, Rabbi, the Jews were but now seeking to stone thee, and goest thou thither again? The end of chapter 10 had shown that, and that was at the Feast of Dedication, which is dated in December, and the Passover, which is approaching, is, I believe it would be in April, so just a few months between. And at the end of that incident at the Feast of Dedication, they were taking up stones to stone him to death, charging him with blasphemy. They say, do you go up there again in this situation? Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours in the day? If a man walk in the day, he stumbleth not, because he seeth the light of this world. But if a man walk in the night, he stumbleth, because the light is not in him. So you see, this is another way of expressing the idea that he is not going to be crucified until his hour is come. We're told the soldiers went out to arrest him, but they couldn't take him because his hour was not yet come. And you have that idea repeatedly. It's in chapter 12 where he finally announces the hour is come and recognizes that he is in the very shadow of the cross. But he puts that idea another way here. There are 12 hours in the day. Nothing can happen. A man, as long as he walks in the day, he stumbles not, because he's got the light. And so the period that God has given him up to the end of his life is the day. And he will be able to walk without stumbling until the end of the daylight. It's just another expression of that idea that the hour was not yet come. It's in the night that a man stumbles, verse 10 says, because the light is not in him. So that's just kind of an allegorical reply to them when they say, how can you go up there when they were trying to kill you? He says, they won't be able to kill me until the time is right. These things spake he, and after this he saith unto them, our friend Lazarus is fallen asleep, but I go that I may awake him out of sleep. The disciples therefore said unto him, Lord, if he is fallen asleep, he will recover. They thought he was talking about something like that a fever is broken, or whatever, referring to the sleep that follows a crisis that he's passed through. Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought that he spake of taking rest in sleep. Then Jesus therefore said unto them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, to the intent ye may believe. Nevertheless, let us go unto him. Now there are lots of these passages in the Gospel of John, and sometime it would be a good exercise for you to just go through the Gospel and pick out all of these passages that put the finger on how the disciples came to have this strong faith that would enable them to hazard their lives and do all that they did, but not compromise their faith in Jesus as the Son of God. The resurrection of Lazarus plays large part in this. Thomas, therefore, who is called Didymus, and that word means twin. I guess he must have been a twin. Said unto his fellow disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. So I don't know how that was said, whether with some courage or maybe just resignation. Well, we might as well just go and die with him. That's the way this is going to end. Verse 17. So when Jesus came, he found that he had been in the tomb 4 days already. Now Bethany was nigh unto Jerusalem, about 15 furlongs off. When you figure that out, it comes to something less than 2 miles. And many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. The Jews is usually identified with Jerusalem and sometimes with the rulers. Here, evidently special reference to friends of Martha and Mary, and the proximity of Bethany to Jerusalem is mentioned there as explaining they had come. Martha, therefore, when she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary sat still in the house. Martha, therefore, said unto Jesus, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. Let's watch for that statement again. And even now I know that whatsoever thou shalt ask of God, God will give thee. So, just a little bit of a hint there. Jesus saith unto her, Thy brother shall rise again. Martha saith unto him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day. She thought he was just saying what you say when you go to a funeral. But Jesus said unto her, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth on me, though he die, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth on me shall never die. Believest thou this? Though he die, yet shall he live. There's a life that he has when he believes on me that is not touched by this physical death. Whosoever liveth and believeth on me shall never die. Eternal life is thought of in this book as beginning even now, and is not touched by physical life. It just goes on. I am the resurrection and the life. And we've had several of these claims now. I am the bread of life. He says after he has authenticated that claim by multiplying loaves and fishes to feed the multitude. He said, I am the light of the world, and he opened up the eyes of a man who was born blind. He says, I am the resurrection and the life, and he calls forth a man who had been dead 4 days out of the tomb. And so the signs authenticate the claims of Jesus. Believest thou this? He asked her. She saith unto him, Yea, Lord, I have believed that thou art the Christ, the Son of God, even he that cometh into the world. And when she had said this, she went away and called Mary, her sister, secretly, saying, The teacher is here, and calleth thee. And she, when she heard it, rose quickly and went unto him. Now Jesus was not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha met him. The Jews then, who were with her in the house and were consoling her, when they saw Mary that she rose up quickly and went out, followed her, supposing that she was going unto the tomb to weep there. So evidently followed her just further to console her. Mary, therefore, when she came where Jesus was and saw him, fell down at his feet, saying unto him, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. The same thing that Martha had said. How many times they must have said that in those 4 days. If only he had been here. Oh.
You know, this seems to be another example, though, of these women being able to grasp, or they seem just like their answers about the resurrections or comment. Mm-hmm. They seem to have insight that seems to have escaped even the apostles, or they got it quicker.
Mary especially shows herself to be a woman of special insight, I think, and in this incident in chapter 12 we see that. But she was the one who sat at his feet and listened to him, which explains a lot. Verse 33, when Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews also weeping who came with her, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. Here the humanity of Jesus is brought out in this passage in a strong way. He groaned in the spirit. The margin has, was moved with indignation in the spirit. This is a strong word. it was a word that would sometimes be used of something like the snorting of a horse. Strong word is expressed here, and there's an indignation. And maybe the thought here is, and we don't have explained quite all the emotion that is involved, but coming in the presence of the enemy here. Death, indignation. He was troubled himself. Some explain that he shook himself. In other words, visibly troubled. He quivered. And he said, "Where have you laid him?" They say unto him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus wept. So he's not just a robot, just a mechanical something. But even though he knows what he's going to do, he's going to bring great rejoicing and calling Lazarus forth from the dead, yet his humanity is caught up in the thing that all of them are experiencing, and he enters into sympathy with them and wept. The Jews therefore said, "Behold, how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not this man who opened the eyes of him that was blind have caused that this man also should not die?" Jesus therefore again, groaning in himself, cometh to the tomb. Now it was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus saith, "Take ye away the stone." Martha, the sister of him that was dead, saith unto him, "Lord, by this time the body decayeth." Now the margin says it's literally, by this time he stinketh, for he hath been dead 4 days. You don't want this stone taken away. She evidently understands he just wants to see the body. Jesus saith unto her, "Said I not unto thee that if thou believest, thou shouldst see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. So again, here's another statement now that explains the significance of what happens here. So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank thee that thou heardest me. And I knew that thou hearest me always, but because of the multitude that standeth around, I said it, that they may believe that thou didst send me." In other words, the thanksgiving to the Father would show that this was done in his power, and thus connecting Jesus with the Father. I said this, that they may believe that thou didst send me. So again, the significance of what is done here is brought out. And when he had thus spoken, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth." You remember the statement back in chapter 5. The hour cometh when they that are in the tomb shall hear the voice of the Son of God and shall come forth. All that are in the tombs, it says, shall hear the voice of the Son of God and come forth. Well, here is an anticipation of that. This powerful word calls forth Lazarus from the grave. He that was dead came forth, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was bound about with a napkin. Jesus saith unto them, "Loose him, and let him go." When Jesus came out of the tomb from his resurrection, what was the difference?
He was in a glorified body. The grave clothes were left in the tomb.
The grave clothes were left behind. He wouldn't need them. Again, I don't know whether there's quite this significance there or not, but it is true that Lazarus is raised from the dead only, what? To die again.
He wasn't resurrected. That wouldn't be a resurrection in the sense that they were talking about in the last day, correct? I think the final resurrection, don't they come in the glorified body, whereas this resurrection is with Lazarus, is that he came out with his grave clothes and the same body that he had. So
Yeah, I'm not sure. We'll see if we can find a chance to discuss that when we discuss the resurrection of Jesus. But at any rate, there's a crucial difference that Jesus was raised not to die again, and Lazarus just came back to this earth life. Then the reaction in 45 and 6, many therefore of the Jews who came to Mary and beheld that which he did believed on him. But some of them went away to the Pharisees and told them the things which Jesus had done. So now notice what makes this such a crucial thing. There's good testimony. Suppose somebody says, well, he was not really dead. What testimony do you have to refute that? John just records here. Okay, and on whose testimony? These sisters. So the people who had known, who've been closest to the facts, testify in this, and John just reports their testimony. And now then, what John reports is that when he called Lazarus forth from the grave, that many of the Jews believe on him. And there's even more testimony than this. This moves the rulers to do something about this. And John reports that. And all of that provides confirmation of the reality of what happens here. So here's the meeting then of the Sanhedrin, verse 47 and following. The chief priests therefore and the Pharisees gathered a council and said, what do we? For this man doeth many signs. If we let him thus alone, all men will believe on him. And the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. Usually the place there has been explained as being the temple. I wonder if another possibility may be that they're referring to their position as rulers and influential people in the nation. Everybody's going to turn to him, and they think of a great revolt and the Romans coming down on them and just losing their independence altogether. But a certain one of them, Caiaphas, being high priest that year, said unto them, ye know nothing at all, nor do you take account that it is expedient for you that one man should die for the people, and that the whole nation perish not. Now this he said, and this is John's comment on that. Now this he said not of himself, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus should die for the nation. And then John adds this in verse 52, and not for the nation only, but that he might also gather together into one the children of God that are scattered abroad. So including those gathered from among Gentiles. So from that day forth they took counsel that they might put him to death. So John sets this forth as an unconscious prophecy. Caiaphas expresses himself in such words here that it is a prediction of the reality of what happens, that he dies for the people, for the nation. And in fact, he speaks a lot more than he realizes when he says this, because you've got another one of those double meaning things in John. He says this in one sense, in the sense of the political salvation of the people in the nation. And John thinks in terms of how those words fit the salvation from sin that is accomplished for the people.
Caiaphas was just saying it's better to go ahead and kill him than get him out of the way, that we don't have these political problems.
Yeah. So Jesus withdraws then, verse 54. Jesus therefore walked no more openly among the Jews, but departed thence into the country, near to the wilderness, into a city called Ephraim, and there he tarried with the disciples. Now the Passover of the Jews was at hand. Many went up to Jerusalem out of the country before the Passover to purify themselves. If they had had contact with a dead body, that would have made them unclean. There were other things that would have made them unclean, and they would needed to go through whatever ritual was required in order to purify themselves and to participate in the Passover. They sought therefore for Jesus, and spake one with another as they stood in the temple, what think ye, that he will not come to the feast? Now the chief priests and the Pharisees had given commandment that if any man knew where he was, he should show it, that they might take him. They evidently don't say that we mean to put him to death, but they wanted to arrest him. And the word had gotten around, and so people began to speculate. What do you think? Maybe he won't come to the feast. And 1 week before the Passover, there was a supper at Bethany. And we studied this also in the Gospel of Mark, but with some detail here that we don't have in Mark. The first 8 verses of chapter 12. Jesus, therefore, 6 days before the Passover, came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom Jesus raised from the dead. So they made him a supper there. Now the connection in John shows additional motivation for this supper, I think. Not just the friendship that had been present between these folk and Jesus, but now Lazarus, raised from the dead, gives special reason for such a supper. And Martha served, but Lazarus was one of them that sat at meat with him. Mary, therefore, took a pound of ointment. The measurement refers to a weight of 12 ounces, Thayer says. A pound of ointment of pure nard, very precious, and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the odor of the ointment. Ointment sounds to me like a salve, but it's not really that, is it? It's something when you break the thing, pour it out, and then it just fills the house. It's a perfume that she pours out. And I think the other account said poured it on his head and now anoints his feet. So, it's nothing that's, you shouldn't think of a gooey mess being poured into somebody's hair, but something that's going to evaporate, that fills the house. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples that should betray him, saith, Why was not this ointment sold for 300 shillings and given to the poor? They spoke in the other accounts of the waste of this. 300 shillings would be like a year's wages for a working man. The parable in the 20th chapter of Matthew points out that a man who worked in the vineyard was paid a shilling a day. A denarius, I think the Greek term is, a day. So 300 shillings, a year's wages. On the one hand, you've got this woman who thinks so much of Jesus that she will not count the cost. It's love that does not think of cost and just lavishes this upon him to honor him in this special way. And then set down alongside that, Judas, talking about the waste and criticizing her. But verse 6 says, Now this he said not because he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief, and having the bag took away what was put therein. Jesus therefore said, Suffer her to keep it against the day of my burying. For the poor ye have always with you, but me ye have not always. Now that translation of verse 7 makes a difficult statement. She has not kept it. She's poured it out, but that was her intention. And the margin explains it in a different way. Let her alone. It was that she might keep it against the day of my burying. And in fact, that agrees with the explanation that's given in Matthew chapter 26 and verse 12, and in Mark chapter 14 and verse 8. She had saved this up to anoint my body aforetime for burial. So, nobody else understood what was going on. The arrest of Jesus becomes a great shock to them, and they're scattered. But here's one woman, this woman who, according to Luke 10, had been sitting at the feet of Jesus, listening to his words. She had been paying attention. She knew what the situation was. And she anoints his body aforetime for burial. Does him this honor. Now verses 9 and 10, important statements here. The common people, therefore, of the Jews learned that he was there, and they came not for Jesus' sake only, but that they might see Lazarus also, whom he had raised from the dead. But the chief priests took counsel that they might put Lazarus also to death, because that by reason of him many of the Jews went away and believed on Jesus. Now John is just a historical reporter here. He reports the facts. And what are the facts? Well, the facts are the testimony of the sisters about what the death of Lazarus, and now he calls him forth from the grave, and the people that were there understood that there was a resurrection. Many of them believed. Now you've got people coming and interviewing Lazarus, and many of the Jews went away and believed on Jesus. And the chief priest testified to the reality of this, because this is the thing that moves them. They have to do something. So all of it together is just bits of historical evidence that about what happened here at the grave of Lazarus. Now verse 12 is the entrance of Jesus, the triumphal entry. On the morrow, a great multitude who had come to the feast, when they heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem, took the branches of the palm trees and went forth to meet him and cried out, Hosanna, which means something like a call for salvation. This is evidently based on the 118th Psalm, verses 25 and 26, and the expression that is used there is save now. So, a call for salvation. Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord, even the King of Israel. So Jesus had not wanted himself proclaimed as king. He had told the disciples at Caesarea Philippi, don't tell anybody until he's raised from the dead, we see later. And but now he permits this. He is openly acknowledged as king. But when this happens, the hour has come, as we go on and see in what follows. But although he permits himself to be recognized as king, and he does not disclaim that title, yet the manner of his entrance is going to say something about the kind of king that he is. And look at that, verse 14. And Jesus, having found a young ass, sat thereon, as it is written, Fear not, daughter of Zion, behold, thy king cometh, sitting on an ass's colt. Now that's a quotation from Zechariah chapter 9 and verse 9, and the point that is made there is that he comes in lowliness, meek, not riding a war horse, but on an ass. This was not after the time of Solomon. The donkey was not the animal of a king. He would ride the war horse. But this king comes riding this lowly animal in lowliness. So he permits himself to be recognized as king, but coming in a way that shows the spiritual nature of his kingdom. And verse 16 says, These things understood not his disciples at the first, but when Jesus was glorified, then remembered they that these things were written of him, and that they had done these things unto him. They began to put things together, the prophecy and the fulfillment. The multitude, therefore, that was with him when he called Lazarus out of the tomb and raised him from the dead, bear witness. For this cause also the multitude went and met him, for that they heard that he had done this sign. So now you've got two crowds, one from the grave of Lazarus that were witnesses to what had happened there, and now the multitude that's come up for the Passover feast. And here's an additional reason why they're going out there and welcoming him as the king. You see how all of this gives testimony to the reality of the raising of Lazarus? The Pharisees therefore said among themselves, Behold how you prevail nothing, lo, the world is gone after him. In what follows now, we have Jesus' last public discourse. The occasion for it is some Greeks that come seeking for him. Verses 20 to 22. Now there were certain Greeks among those that went up to worship at the feast. These therefore came to Philip. Now these must have been people like the Ethiopian eunuch, others like that would had learned about God and came to worship. The Ethiopian had come to Jerusalem to worship. These therefore came to Philip, who was of Bethsaida of Galilee, and asked him, saying, Sir, we would see Jesus. Philip cometh and telleth Andrew. Andrew cometh and Philip, and they tell Jesus. And Jesus' response to this, we don't ever see whether these Greeks get to see Jesus or not. But the coming of Greeks to him causes Jesus to speak of the significance of the present moment and what is to happen. These Greeks coming is an anticipation of the salvation that is to be brought for the whole world. And Jesus answered them, saying, the hour is come that the Son of Man should be glorified. Now, his death will be the first step for that, the lifting up of the Son of Man. We'll see that in what follows. Verily, verily, I say unto you, except a grain of wheat fall into the earth and die, it abideth by itself alone. But if it die, it beareth much fruit. You see, he is anticipating all the fruit that is to be born as a result of his death. And the coming of these Greeks are the occasion for his speaking of that. It's an anticipation of the many from the whole world that would be brought to him. Now, what he says about himself now indicates also something about the meaning of discipleship. I'm going to have to move too fast for this. There's a lot of detail that needs noticing, but there's just no time. Verse 25, he that loveth his life loseth it, and he that hateth his life in this world shall keep it unto life eternal. If any man serve me, let him follow me, and where I am, there shall also my servant be. If any man serve him, or serve me, him will the Father honor. So this fits in the place of some teaching that we have in the other Gospels when Jesus talked about himself going to Jerusalem and being put to death. Then he speaks of his disciples having to bear the cross and follow him. So this is a similar passage. His own death and the nature of his messiahship determines what it's going to mean to be a follower of his. But now notice verse 27. Now is my soul troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. But for this cause came I unto this hour. Father, glorify thy name. So this is what he prays. And it's the equivalent of what he prays according to the Synoptic Gospels in the garden when he brings himself into submission to the will of the Father. Thy will be done. And so he prays, Father, glorify thy name. Here's a submission to the Father's will. There came therefore a voice out of heaven saying, I have both glorified it and will glorify it again. During his public ministry, the miracles and all of that, he's glorifying his name, and now will glorify it again. The multitude, therefore, that stood by and heard it, said that it had thundered. Others said, an angel hath spoken to him. Jesus answered and said, this voice hath not come for my sake, but for your sakes. Now listen carefully what his explanation is of the present moment, the significance of the present moment of time. Now is the judgment of this world. Now shall the prince of this world be cast out. And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto myself. Now connect that with chapter 6, verses 44 and 45, where he spoke of the Father drawing men unto him, but he says they'll be taught of God, they'll hear the voice, they'll learn, they'll come. Okay? I, if I be lifted up, will draw all men unto myself. All men unto myself. Now some will resist the message and the drawing, the teaching. But what he does for all. He reaches out for all. If I be lifted up from the earth. When we sing that song, we're misusing these words. Lift him up, lift him up. This is talking about the crucifixion. He was signifying by what manner of death he should die. It was by his death that the judgment would come upon the world. It looked like a judgment was being made on him. But by judging him, the world was judging itself. It was the defeat of the devil, the casting out of the prince of this world that would be brought about by means of his death. Put Hebrews 2:14 with this. Through his death, he brings to naught him that had the power of death. So, his death becomes the means of victory. the establishment of His kingdom and His dominion, and drawing men unto Himself, and driving Satan out of this usurped dominion that he has. The multitude therefore answered him, We have heard out of the law that the Christ abideth forever. And how sayest thou, the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is this Son of Man? They understood the reference to the death. Jesus therefore said unto them, Yet a little while is the light among you. Walk while you have the light, that darkness overtake you not. And he that walketh in the darkness knoweth not whither he goeth. While you have the light, believe on the light, that you may become sons of light. So, he answers them, but in a certain way. They say, What are you talking about? Who is this Son of Man that must be lifted up? We understood the Messiah would abide forever. Well, in a way, this is a reply to what they said. The one, this is from Linsky, I'm quoting. In a way, this is a reply. The one they needed, the reply they needed, not the one they asked. The answer is, believe on the light, and you'll know of who this Son of Man is. And unless you believe, how can you ever know, remaining as you do in darkness? Believe on the light. Make use of the time you have to believe on the light, and then you'll become sons of light. You'll know the answer to your question when you believe. All right. In the closing passages here, we have first a retrospect by the author, John, as he looks back and sums up the things that have happened. This is the end of the public ministry, and John looks back over it. These things spake Jesus, and he departed and hid himself from them. But though he had done so many signs before them, yet they believed not on him, that the word of Isaiah the prophet might be fulfilled, which he spake, Lord, who hath believed our report? And to whom hath the arm of the Lord been revealed? It's the beginning of Isaiah 53, which is the passage about the suffering servant. So few believe that you have to ask, who hath believed? Who hath believed our report? In spite of so many signs, they believed not on him. Now verses 39 and 40 explain what lies back of the unbelief. For this cause they could not believe, for that Isaiah said again, He hath blinded their eyes, and he hardened their heart, lest they should see with their eyes and perceive with their heart, and should turn, and I should heal them. I have no time to go into this. When you turn to Matthew's quotation of this in Matthew the 13th chapter, and I think I have this in the study guide, Matthew 13, 14, and 15, he points out the responsibility of the individuals. Their eyes they have closed. And already in various speeches, Jesus has pointed out in John the responsibility of the individuals. He had shown these signs. He had spoken the words. He had done so many things to make it possible for them to believe, but they had hardened their hearts. And so his coming was not what they wanted, and being such as they were, the effect of it was to harden their hearts. It becomes a judgment of God against them. But go back to earlier passages like John chapter 5 verses 38 to 47. He says, You will not come to me that you may have life. How can you believe, who seek glory one of another, and the glory of the only God you seek not? How can you believe, being such people as that? See, passages like that will help you to understand this. Being such as you are, how can you believe? When he comes speaking from the Father, it'll only harden their hearts, they being such people as they are. And so I think that will help explain that. And yet there were exceptions. Verses 42 and 43 point out, even among the rulers, they believed but did not confess it, lest they should be put out of the synagogue, for they love the glory that is of men more than the glory that is of God. The closing passage, 44 to 50, is a final summary and an appeal for faith. We have no time really to discuss this, but I want you to read this carefully because it sums up things that Jesus has been saying all through in his message to the world. he cried and said, "He that believeth on me, believeth not on me, but on him that sent me." And it goes on to point out the issues that are involved in this. The one who does not receive me, but who rejects me, has one that judges him. The word that I spake, the same shall judge him in the last day. Verse 48 says, and verse 49 points out the reason, because I spake from the Father. He hath given me a commandment, what I should say and what I should speak, and I know that his commandment is life eternal. The things therefore which I speak, even as the Father hath said unto me, so I speak. So in this passage, we have a summary of the claims of Jesus. The light of the world, verse 46. The one who speaks the words of God. So that answers the question, who is this Jesus that our evaluation of him should have such tremendous consequences as are pointed out here? In his word there is salvation, there is life, but to refuse to believe is to have his word to judge them at the last day, a condemning judgment, because it is the word of God. And so this final passage will sum up the issues that are involved in his call to them to believe. And that's the way John closes out the account of the public ministry of Jesus.